Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you very much for joining us, and welcome to an online launch of the Marketing Society Scotland Star Awards 2023. I'm very excited to be here, even though I'm in my living room. If I think back to this year, the Star Awards event was absolutely one of the highlights of my year, and I thoroughly enjoyed judging and seeing some of the fantastic work coming out of our industry in Scotland. Especially looking forward to celebrating together in June next year. Firstly though, the Star Awards exist to complement the vision to build a vibrant marketing community in Scotland, one that's renowned for enlightened thinking, innovation and creativity. This year's event was the biggest yet, and it reflected more entrants than the year before and more new entrants than the year before. That makes me really excited for what's to come next year. So what are we here for today? We're here to launch next year's Star Awards. We're here to introduce a wonderfully wild and new creative idea for the awards. We're here to share some background around the awards, also to share some insight from a winning campaign and to talk about how to craft, write award-winning category entries. Lastly, we'll learn about how the awards are judged and how to get involved in judging yourself with your businesses. I will be introducing and talking to some guests, but please feel free to put questions in the chat function as we go, and we'll absolutely leave some more time for questions at the end of the hour that we have. Now, before I do introduce a great new creative, there's a few things that I must mention before I do so. So judging is open to all members, and leader members are invited to join judging panels. Invites for this will be shared next week, and there's a maximum of 4 leaders on those panels per organisation. With regards to first-time entries, these are free of charge, fantastic, for 1 entry per organisation. So there's a chance for free glory, or depending on how you look at it, only the price of marketing superstardom to consider. The closing date for entries is the 13th of February, with an option for late entry for a small additional fee. In my experience, early writing, early consideration always pays off. With regards to nominations, some of the categories within the awards are free to enter or indeed to nominate someone for. An example of this is with the Rising Star category for agency and for marketing, and the same deadline of the 13th of February applies to this one as well. Now, for those curious paper writers amongst you, we have some winning case studies on our website, and there's plenty of wisdom contained within those. And talking of wisdom, it's time for me to stop talking and to introduce Kat Summers, the Joint Managing Director of Guy&Co, our creative partners for the Marketing Society Star Awards next year, who is going to introduce a fantastic new creative idea for the awards. Hi, Kat.
Hello, Paul, and everyone here. Thank you very much. And yeah, thank you so much for the opportunity to, I guess, tackle the creative theme for this year's awards. It's a real privilege. It's the one that all agencies kind of want to get their teeth into, because it really is what we kind of think is the Oscars of the Scottish marketing scene. So we've had a lot of fun with this year's creative, which I'm going to pull up on screen and share a little bit more with you. I've resisted the urge to put an animal mask or ears on today, but this is all about kind of wild creatures and lots of kind of animalistic puns that we've had a lot of fun with. But really, there's kind of serious undertones here. It's all about wildly effective work at the heart of what we believe makes winning awards papers. We want to do something really wild this year and really kind of highlight effectiveness, which is something that we really believe in at Guy&Co. And it's something that's really, really pertinent kind of now more than ever in this climate. You know, effectiveness is something that brands need to demonstrate to their boards, agencies need to demonstrate to their clients. And there's lots of stats to kind of back up that, you know, we're in tough kind of economic climate. 90% of marketers are reporting cuts to marketing budgets. And the latest IPA bellwether report actually kind of predicts 4 years of slashed advertising spend. So it's not all doom and gloom, but it really is important to demonstrate that effectiveness and return on investment. So whilst, you know, brave ideas and brilliant storytelling can, you know, might win you brilliant creative awards, you know, we really believe that Marketing Star Awards, it's got to be wildly effective to get you that gold. And especially, you know, I guess sitting on the judging panel, you know, you see the quality of entries kind of get better year on year, and it really takes the brilliant results and the brilliant effectiveness to punch out and win a gold. And something that Hugh will chat to later on about just the quality of entries year on year. So we really want to let the trumpet blowing begin, and wildly effectiveness is not just about the big brands and the big budget work. It really can be, you know, startups doing brilliant things. It can be the brilliant design strategies as well as big integrated advertising campaigns. And that's what's great as a judge as well, when you really see, you know, the variety come through and you really see wild cards maybe that you wouldn't expect, but they can really demonstrate what we've done effectively. And this is going to be really important this year as well. There's actually a change to one of the criteria that we are only going to be able to enter any campaign into a maximum of 2 awards. So I think we're going to have to, as a kind of society and everybody entering, have those conversations early amongst agency rosters, with your clients, with your stakeholders, and actually really look at what category you've been most wildly effective at, or what 2 categories. But I think planning those categories is going to be more important than ever. So what we've kind of been working with Paul and the Marketing Society team and the Lux teams on is really how we can use this wildly effective creative theme to get as many people kind of inspired and participating with the awards across the journey, from the entries to entry deadline in February right through to the events in June. And it's something that, you know, we want to get people behind it. I feel you know, very proud and quite protective of the Star Awards in the Scottish marketing industry. I think it's something that we should all really get behind and protect. So from entering, we want to get people behind from entering different categories, you know, the different sectors, the different communication, strategic categories that you can enter. To different sectors as well. We really want to push different sectors like technology as well, and inspire more entries from them. Through to nominations, so there's things like the Rising Creative Stars that you can nominate various agency and client stars and people that really are rising through the industry. And through to judging as well, that Hugh will speak to in a little bit. You know, I think it's really important, obviously, as senior leaders to step up as judges and help really kind of identify what makes wildly effective work. But there's ways that lots of people can participate in this online as well, at more junior levels. And I think that's a brilliant way of actually getting to understand the criteria and understand what it takes to win a gold award. It's something I encourage all my team to do. And really keen this year as well, we've been working on more kind of tools and support across the board. So different tools for first-time judges and different tools for first-time entries as well. So we're going to have new tools to share just to help inspire and support entries. Also working with Paul and the Lux team on the, you know, Roar with Pride is going to be the big event come June, where we'll see who wins the top gongs, and working on a bit of an event format that could be wilder than ever and could be something, you know, we really hope everyone's going to want to get their tickets and tables booked. It's going to be a fantastic event. And you might see a few little memes come through on the Marketing Society channels, which might be a Marketing Society first, potentially. And just keen to really kind of start the conversation about the journey of what it takes to win an award, and whether it's crunching down your word limit, meeting your deadlines, agreeing your categories. So really keen for people to get behind this. I think we can all have quite a bit of fun with it, share some memes on the social channels. So it's something you'll see start to filter through. So hopefully lots of ways to get behind this. We're really hoping the wildly effective thematic inspires people to really think about what it takes to win an award, and make sure that effectiveness and that return on the marketing investment is really there. Because for me, that's what it really takes to win a gold.
Thank you very much, Kat. I'm all for anything that allows us to talk about giraffe gifs and memes in a professional day-to-day. But I think the theme absolutely nails something on the head, and that wild element is that the results and the communication of the results has to be almost supercharged, but the efficacy and when people write papers, going back to being really clear about about what are our objectives and what is the situation or challenge or opportunity at the start, and then allowing those results to flow all the way through. Quite often we have these great ideas and great creative, and sometimes the results sort of peter away through a paper. So I'm really looking forward to people's interpretation of the theme coming through papers, but also on the evening. And I'm really looking forward to how that theme's brought to life on the event. So thanks very much for sharing. And we understand, Kat, you have to nip off into another meeting. And we'll go, thanks very much for sharing and for working on that. It's been my favourite PDF to open over the last couple of months and seeing that creative really develop. So thanks again. And the next guest we have to speak to us today is Hugh Burkitt, who is our esteemed chair of the Star Awards judging process. Now, Hugh, I wonder, it'd be great if you can share some insight and some detail around the process, what judges might be looking for, and how to make an awards category paper really stand out, please.
Very good, and looking forward to that, and indeed looking forward to the 2023 awards, despite the number of years that I have been doing this. I'm a bit of a veteran at it now. I do really enjoy it. Frankly, it's great fun sitting in judgment on other people's work. It's so much easier than doing it yourself. And that's really my starting point, that the judging process here in Scotland is wonderfully democratic, much more so than it is in England. And I counted up on the website, over 120 people were actually involved in panels last year, which is terrific. And indeed, any member of the Marketing Society, as Paul has already said, can actually take part. But of course, in taking part, you do have to score the awards. And actually, the initial process is genuinely very thorough. So what I'm mainly looking at, I'm one of, in fact, a number of chairs of panels when it comes to the actual judging process. And I usually sit with a panel of about half a dozen other people, and we go through each case in some detail, and we make sure that every case really is scored against the criteria. And then we have a very, sometimes passionate, sometimes easy discussion as to who actually stands out as the winner, and then the silver and the bronze. But clearly the scoring is the starting point. So if you're a potential entrant, then obviously going and looking at the criteria and looking at what the judge is going to be marking is the obvious starting point. Now, in fact, over the years, I've had many arguments with Graham Ather, who's the sort of hidden, mastermind really behind all these awards, but he wisely likes to keep out of sight. I'm the kind of constitutional monarch there to sort of, advise, encourage, and warn. But we bicker about the actual weighting of all the different criteria in the awards from time to time. But broadly, I mean, I'm very much in favour of the scoring system. I'm very much in favour of the criteria we've got. I might weight it slightly differently, but we'll come to that. We'll come to that in a minute. So it all starts with the scoring, and it is genuinely a very democratic process. And I do encourage you to get involved if you haven't already. So that's something about the sort of the overall judging process. I think it's a very good one. In many ways, I think better than what happens in England, where there's a very autocratic, top-down, only top marketing directors take part sort of system. The second thing I was asked to look at was what are the judges looking for? Well, this is in some ways a very obvious question, and in some ways a difficult one to answer. But putting it its most simple, they're looking for a good story. It's what human beings love. We all love a story, and a good story has a beginning, a middle, and an end. So it's a good story, well told, as we've said sometimes in the past, in promoting these awards. And so what does one mean by that? Well, again, the criteria actually help you, but it's perhaps sometimes a little bit pedantic just to write down the criteria that the scoring system that the judge is looking for, and then write your case history, filling in each of those gaps on the form, if you like. But the principle is simply this: that a good story, in marketing terms, it starts with a problem, or perhaps use a more fashionable modern word, a challenge. So there is a bit of opportunity, I think, to be a bit creative about your challenge. You can't go too overboard about it, because let's face it, you're up against, you're presenting your case to other marketing professionals. But even if actually you happen to be promoting one of the best brands in even in the market, which is actually doing very well already. I think there's always got to be some kind of difficulty that you're currently in, you've got to get out of. So make the judges at the outset feel, well, this is this really is going to be quite tricky, isn't it? But I leave that to some extent to your creativity. And then of course you come to a brilliant solution. And let's face it, some solutions are more brilliant than others. Obviously, it's been lovely today actually to see Kat talking about a campaign. And yes, I absolutely agree that the center really of these awards is about, are they wildly effective? Because we all need to show how effective marketing is at the moment and convince our sort of financial bosses. But have we got a brilliant solution? I mean, it's lovely when you see a real creative idea. And obviously for this year's awards, we have got a creative idea. It's lovely when you see good, strong, well executed work. But I'm very well aware that budgets in Scotland are often not all that big. And so there's a limit to what you can do. So sometimes the creativity, sometimes the brilliant solution is in just something very, very unusual, very different, very, very thoughtful. So there are lots of different ways of coming across well as far as the execution is concerned. But then we come to the critical bit, and it's what Kat has already mentioned, and that's demonstrable or quantifiable results. Is the campaign in the end wildly effective? And this is where I sometimes, as I say, have an argument with Graham, because I might give it 50% of the marks actually in the whole scheme of things, rather than the 20 or 25, depending on the category and so on, that it actually has. Really, very often, this is at the heart of it. Has the damn thing actually worked? And I'd go so far as to say sometimes, perhaps, the real answer to how you produce a campaign that's really effective is, well, you had to start 2 years ago, if you see what I mean. It's about not only planning something that is really good, but it's like you've also got to set up the research around it, which is going to help you show that it is really good. But not those research budgets aren't always available. But do please try and have some numbers when it's coming to demonstrating that you're wildly effective. One gets so bored with phrases like huge success or massive impact or whatever it is. I mean, numbers really do help. And for me, particularly, if it's any kind of commercial brand, then any kind of commercial data. I mean, we understand that, clients particularly don't want to give away data about profitability, and they get rather sensitive and all the rest of it. Sometimes it may be absolutely clear that if you can quote some sales figures, or if you can't quote the sales figures, at least give us an index or give us something which, shows that the brand has earned some money. Because, I mean, in the end, that's the kind of wild effectiveness we most want to demonstrate this year. It is about, getting a commercial return from your marketing. So please, if you possibly can, some commercial results around sales and or profit. And then from that, if you can, please, yes, around a return on, I was taught not to say investment, return on marketing expenditure. But, that would be terrific. But I do recognize that also that it's particularly the case in Scotland that many of the very best case histories are not actually commercial. They're about public service. And Scotland has an absolutely brilliant record for public service campaigns. And indeed, many of those public service campaigns have won, prizes in the London or English awards as well. And I really encourage, if you are a winner in Scotland, or if you think you're going to be a winner in Scotland, to enter the London awards as well. But when it comes to those awards, those categories, demonstrating effectiveness, demonstrating you're wildly effective, of course, critically, if you can, is about behavior. It's not just about claimed behavior, or it's not about sort of numbers of impacts or number of people who, went to a website or whatever. And that's good. I mean, it's a legitimate objective. But in the end, if you possibly can, after all, a public service campaign is directed at usually at changing behavior in some way or another. And if you can demonstrate that you've actually done that, then that's terrific. I realize sometimes that isn't available, and you've got to go to claimed behavior and all the rest of it, but you understand what I'm driving at. The harder your data can actually be on your effectiveness, on your wild effectiveness, then the better it will be. So that's really what I've got to say about what the judge is looking for. This particular judge certainly is really looking for, is always looking for effectiveness. And even if you don't have a particularly large budget, I hope you can find some figures which will actually demonstrate that your campaign has been effective. Now, how do you make your story stand out? Good stories, I think, really do stand out. So I come back to the point, really, that of course, in some ways, you ought to be planning now not for the 2023 awards, but for the 2024 or 25 awards, because it's really, starting your good marketing now. And I think a genuinely good marketing story always does stand out. But of course, we're also talking here about how to present your story as well as you possibly can. So, think about, how you are going to demonstrate each of those criteria. Try and be clear in your own mind. Does it have a beginning, middle, and end? I think it is very important to try and follow the rules. The rules are sort of very clearly there on the website about what that criteria is looking for. Sorry, what that category is looking for. And then how the judges are going to score it. So keep that always clearly in mind. I think a good entry, it flows logically through that whole sort of process in a way rather like following a sort of a good piece of music that you like. You kind of know what the next note's going to be. There's a sort of you're going, oh yes, I thought it was going to do very well, and so it does. So it really, the whole thing sort of flows really nicely through the thing. I would say that overall, of course, again, the standard of the presentation of Scottish Awards is terrific. I mean, it's and has really improved over the years. I mean, visually, it's very, very good, but obviously, it's not just about putting in some nice pictures. It's also keeping the words flowing. And actually, 1,500 is plenty to tell the stories. So that really shouldn't be a problem. So there we are. Start with a good story. Tell it clearly. As Paul has already said, do start now, because something we've had a bit of time to think about and revise, and perhaps show to other people and get them to revise, will be so much better than something you sort of had to sort of cobble together at the last minute when you were looking for bits of data and all the rest of it, and suddenly it's all done in a terrible rush. So really get started on it. Get started on it now is what I'd say. And then here's my other critical piece of advice. Look at the previous winners. Again, quite a lot of those are available, though actually just checking on this year's website, I was a little disappointed that quite a number of the winners that in the different categories, you then went to look what the case histories were available. Paul, you might like to address this in due course. When you went to the case histories where they weren't actually the winners. Now we're about to see one Rockback, which at the time I thought was terrific. I mean, as soon as I saw the work, I thought this is terrific because it's so unusual in what would you expect to be a rather sort of dull category, and very, very well done. So that's there, and we're going to talk about it in a minute. But actually, Paul and other people involved in planning the awards, you might like to think about whether we should be tougher with entrants about making their case available afterwards. I mean, you can always redact data, but maybe we should say it's if you're going to be a winner and you want to boast about that, then perhaps you should also be required to share it. But anyway, that's my final thought. So we're on to I think looking at one of the best winners of last year, isn't that right, Paul?
Yes, we are indeed, and I would reiterate that urge for people to make the case studies available, redacted or otherwise, and I think that advice and looking at other case studies and even following up with the individuals or people who possibly judged it at the Marketing Society or making contact with the agencies involved. I think our industry is quite an open one, and if permission is sought, then it can quite often be granted. Thanks very much, Hugh. I really like your link to storytelling there, and a story might include an element of moral jeopardy, and that is that situation analysis of what opportunity have we not realised, or what has changed, and plenty has changed in the world in the last 3 years for that situational analysis, leading to objectives and efficacy to be very, very important. And then we have one question for you, Hugh, from the floor, if that's okay. Sure. Could you tell us more about how the judging panels score entries fairly by small and large agencies or clients, because there's a wide variety. And within that, is there any advice that you would have for small companies that are thinking about entering perhaps for the first time?
Well, I mean, there is a special category for small and medium enterprises, but they very often can compete, I think, with the big boys in the open categories, if you like. Because, as I say, it is all about, being clear about your objectives. How big was your challenge? After all, if you're a small brand, then you could argue that the challenge was much bigger in the first place, wasn't it? So you were up against a very tough thing, and clearly you had less budget. I mean, you can make the point you had compare your budget perhaps with some of your competitors or something like that. Say, well, despite having a much smaller budget, we achieved the following results, which are therefore, percentage terms, really much more impressive. So I think we're all, we the judges are often on the side of the underdog. So I would overall, and as for small agency versus large agency, well, I spent most of my life working for a small agency. I was trying to make it larger, but it never got as large as I would have liked. But it's not about quantity, it's, or size of an agency. It's about the quality of their work and their thinking, isn't it? And I think good quality of thinking and storytelling always comes through.
Yeah. And I think good papers it's not a very tangible thing, can quite often reflect the relationship between an agency and a client and how deep rooted it is. And to your point, the research that they've conducted or commissioned together and the resulting output, campaign and results that they achieve. Thank you very much again, Hugh. We are going to, in the interest of time, move on to our next guests. And they are Nick, Laurie and Dave King of StudioLR, who are here to talk to us about a campaign, not just a goal-winning campaign, multi-award-winning piece of work with Rockback. Hi, folks.
Hello. So we're just going to give a quick run through of the project and then get into some tips that sort of helped us when we were writing the paper for it. So I'm just going to try and figure out how to share my screen without breaking this. Hopefully it works. Is that visible? Yes, good, cool. So we started this project a few years ago, before pandemic times and all that. It was quite a long one. So the client that we started with was Terex Trucks. They are a company from Motherwell who build these gigantic dump trucks that work in like mines and quarries and big construction sites and stuff. And they'd become part of the Volvo group, and they'd had loads of investments, and the factory was like getting revamped with all this cool machinery and stuff, but their brand hadn't really moved with it. It still looked very much the same to the outside world. And they actually had this one bit of their heritage that harked back to like ages and ages ago, which was a part of a company they used to be that they still shared the name of. So this was a little bit tricky for them because it made it difficult for them to have their own reputation. People still confused them with Terex Corp. And they just, they struggled to build a reputation of their own, and they actually had a license fee for this name as well. So they were kind of thinking that it was nearly time for a change for them to do something a bit different. So they did a bit of research with their sort of dealers and customers and the people who knew them and had known them for years. And the research came back, they had a few weaknesses, but they also had a couple of strengths that were really good. So they were a bit quiet, not enough presence. People saw them as sort of past their glory, like they used to be like quite a big name in the industry, but maybe weren't anymore. And folk thought like the haulers weren't up to the toughest challenges and all that. But their key strengths were that people thought it was a reliable machine, no bells and whistles. They liked that, and they had this reassuring heritage, which turned out it was more linked to the Motherwell factory and the team who make them. It was the people saw the skills in that rather than just attaching it to the name. So they decided to go for a full rebrand, which was very exciting for us, and we actually got the job because it was kind of a huge one, probably the biggest one we've done. So we had some aims for it, which was they needed to be seen as a smart investment and not a cheap option that people thought they were, a solid, reliable partner, not an underperformer, and modern and energetic, with the reassuring heritage, and not just a sort of heritage relic sort of brand. We had a bit of a fun internal aim as well, which had been there from the very beginning between us and the client team. which was that we wanted to create something that people wanted to be seen wearing, something like really cool that people would want to wear in a t-shirt, kind of like all the cat products and stuff like that. So we started off with naming, which was a rigorous process, obviously, because you're creating a global brand. So we started with a long list of hundreds of names, and they were everything like inspired from Scottish things and Swedish things because of Volvo. We had mythological ideas, we had really descriptive things. It was, yeah, every direction. And these all got narrowed down into a sort of list of 12, which we took to desk research just to check for like ownability, cultural significance and global meanings and stuff. We had a historian involved looking into things at that point. And then this got narrowed down to 5 names that went for legal testing with the Volvo Group team, just to check for protectability, trademarking, and all the sort of online availability and everything. And one name came out completely clean, which was Rockback, which is obviously one of the descriptive names because you put rocks in the back. Simple as that. So at that point, we had to sort of do loads and loads of strategy work to try and figure out and pin down exactly who this brand was before we started doing creative. And we got to this: solid as a Rockback. From the haulers to the people who build and support them, Rockback is a brand you can bank on to work hard every day, backed by generations of knowledge and expertise. This is a brand that's got your back. So many back puns. And one other interesting thing that came out of all the sort of strategy work, which was a line that we kind of used as a crux for like the entire creative, was this idea of craft and graft in perfect balance. So the haulers and the people in the factory are hardworking. It's a big noisy place, but it's also filled with this precision and knowledge and sort of real expertise. So these were 2 things that sort of work in tandem. And we thought it'd be fun to just run that through the design of everything. So we've got dark and light, we've got rock textures and metallic textures, we've got like light and heavy, different like font weights and everything. So literally just one idea carried through every little bit of the branding. Even the photography, so we did all the photography in the factory, well, most of the photography in the factory, and we had these big slick sort of hero shots of the haulers and these sort of really sexy dark moody images of close-ups and stuff. The shooting in the factory was really fun because we had to do it at night because obviously it's a working factory and you can't interrupt what the guys are doing every day, making these really huge expensive haulers. So I think we did 2 night shoots in there, but it was pretty funny because we had our literal client team walking into Sparks and stuff. This is one of my favorite shots from the factory, and that in the yellow hat in the middle is Victoria from our marketing team. We were just like, just keep walking into the fire, keep walking into the fire. But it came out brilliantly. And we also got to do some shoots in a quarry, which was great fun. There's me and Mark hard at work hiding from the wind. I think one of the most challenging bits of this was that obviously the brand hadn't been launched yet or anything, so you couldn't move the haulers to the quarry with the name on them or anything. So we had to apply the vinyls when the haulers arrived, then remove them beforehand, and oh, it was fussy, but we got some really cracking shots out of it. So we had all the parts that we needed to start sort of building the assets and stuff for the brand. And I suppose we started with sort of the campaign stuff, which was in 2 parts really, because I mean, the first part we had to tell people that Terex Trucks was now Rockback, that they had literally changed. So 8 decades of hauling heritage, 1 new name was the sort of line we ran for that. And then we got to move into the sort of fun sort of Rockback brand messages, where we're just sort of trying to build the personality of the brand so that everyone could see it. We had quite a good sort of set of lines in English, but obviously this is a global brand, so we had to make sure that they translated well. And we didn't want to do just straight translations, so we got translators to suggest things as well, so like phrases that work well in their language and stuff. So in Italian it turned into your fortress, or in Czech it turned into the spine that does not bend, sort of thing. So we had like a colossal bank of just different languages, different headlines and stuff, which was great to work with. And then it was just pretty much the standard rollout from there. So we did the website, brochures, all the sort of collateral you would expect for a brand. We got to do some really fun stuff as well, though. I think, yeah, launch event. So we launched this, it was towards the end of lockdown, but everything was very much still locked down. So we had to do it all on Zoom. I think for a lot of the time when we were working on the brand, we kind of expected things to be better by the time we got to the launch so that we could do a sort of in-person thing, but it didn't happen. So we ended up having to do pre-filmed parts. We built an entire set in the factory and we shot like sort of talk show type pieces. We had the Red Hot Chili Peppers performing in the factory on the trucks. It was hilarious. And it went down really well, 600 people from 22 countries, 5 times the last in-person hauler launch that they had. And 80% of the VIPs stayed on Zoom for a chat after the event, which ran on quite long. This was also done in multiple time zones. So thank you, Lux Events, for sorting that out for us, because it was very scary. The idea of actually trying to time manage all these things, I stayed away from it. I just kept my head down. I'm like, I don't understand. But one thing we did to try and sort of build a better connection between people, obviously, because everyone's having to sit alone and watch this event in their own house, and it could be not very exciting for them. So we made these little sort of boxes that were padlocked. So they were all full of like goodies and stuff with the Rockback name on them. We sent these out in advance of the launch. Obviously, people couldn't open them, otherwise that would spoil the surprise of the name. So they were padlocked and the code for the padlocks was given out at the event. And then people got to open them and enjoy their goodies. And one of the fun things that was in the box, which was, I never thought I would ever be doing this for a brand, was we got a mixologist in, we created a signature Rockback cocktail, which was all based on the personality of the brand, which was very good fun. And they can serve these at all their events. They've had them at events before. They've been giving them out as sort of gift packets for like people who attend events and stuff. So it's just a nice little sort of touch to the whole job. And the whole thing went ridiculously well. Couldn't be happier with it. And the client team were extremely, I assume they still are, extremely happy as well. All of our digital sort of reach was up. The sales were up. They had the best sales week in their entire history in Motherwell. Market share was up a huge amount. And obviously, putting all of this into a paper, we then won 3 awards at the Marketing Society, and our client team won Team of the Year. And Jacqueline Reid won Leader of the Year, which was very well deserved. So now we're going to move into how to turn a great project into an actual award winner, which is not always a given. I'm just going to hand over to Dave. Dave, shout at me if I move the slides wrong.
Yeah, cool. So I think, can you hear me okay, yeah? Yeah. I'm going to take the silence as a yes, because I can see my face.
We can, Dave.
Yeah, perfect. So I guess, yeah, Nick just mentioned there, it's not always a given that a great project is necessarily going to be an award winner. We've done lots of things that we think were good that we didn't win awards for. But I think there's things in common with the ones that do go well. And having written a lot of these papers, I think there's things we can learn. So the first thing I would say, we've kind of given you a little bit of our process, a 5-point process of how we write these things. The first one, say, seems pretty obvious, but gathering all the work. And I think Paul just touched on something just beforehand that is sort of what we were getting at with this, is that a lot of the best work, the ones that tend to win, you can see there's a kind of intangible thing with the relationship between the client and the agency. And I guess that's why I've kind of called this out as a whole separate part of gathering all the work, is that typically I think the best work isn't one project. It's messier than that. You know, the best client relationships aren't really transactional project-driven relationships. They tend to be that you might come up with a proactive proposal of some sort, work on something together, or a client might have half an idea and think, oh, could we explore this? Or you both kind of work on something together that doesn't quite go anywhere, but you move on to something else and you realize the thing you abandoned actually influenced this further part. So For this project in particular, we've been working with Terex trucks for years. So we had years of strategy and research and insight that actually is perfectly relevant to where we ended up here. And it influenced the whole project, but it might not have been in the same folder. You know, when you look back through your job folders, you realize, oh, that's actually parked somewhere completely different. It's a different client name and everything. And actually this job, it doesn't always come in the way that you'd think it did. So I call this one job. To be honest, this is a kind of wrap up of 4 or 5 different jobs that took place over the course of a year, because obviously you can't really create a brand strategy from scratch, create a brand name from scratch, create a brand identity from scratch, a brand launch from scratch, and assume that's all one project. You know, it's lots of little things bolted on. But even if you just took it as the brand creation itself, that started as us looking at the color of the truck. We were talking with the client team about the need for change. And they had thought, well, maybe if we kind of revamp the truck, we could look at that. So the very first thing we were looking at in relation to any of this was, well, how could the new truck look? And you think, when you come to write a paper like this about a big brand project where you've got, you know, the market share going up 73% and all this, the last thing you would think of was that a folder about a truck color might be relevant. But of course, that's the folder where we had all the initial research and our initial thinking as to why this project should happen. So I guess what I'm getting at is gathering the work might not be as simple as you think. It's probably dotted all over the place. It might be in emails between you and the client. It might be in proposals that got shelved. It might be in little projects that didn't go somewhere. It's just thinking a little bit bigger. This isn't just writing a case study. You know, it's not like a one project and it's finished. It's kind of it's showcasing a relationship of what you've done together over the course of a certain amount of time and what you've achieved with it. So I guess it's thinking a little bit more openly and a little bit out of the bounds of one project. Then once you've got that, I guess that in itself can seem a bit like that could be messy just in your own emails and your own files. But I think you've also then got to think of, well, who else was involved? You know, there'll be, of course, the client team, but there'll also be agency partners. You may have a PR partner, media partners, other creative agencies might have been involved, production agencies. There's all sorts of people who you think might not be entirely relevant, but they absolutely will, you know, to getting all the detail out. Even you might think that a production company might not be part of, you know, writing the strategy part of a brand paper, but actually they might have behind the scenes footage from the later execution of it that you realize makes the whole paper better. If we can show this and we can show how we made it, it just makes it an interesting story to tell. So I think getting the whole wider team around at that point as well is another, get them around early, because the version of the project that's in your head probably isn't the entire project. That's what I've learned over the years, that other people are storing little things that you forget about, and the job of the paper, I suppose, is to piece it all together into something bulletproof. So the second part, assuming you've got all of that, is to gather the results. The thing I would say here is this will take ages. You might think it's going to be a simple, straightforward thing, like we've got a research agency on board, or the client has a good a good dashboard with all the data on it, or that kind of thing. It's never that simple. You know, we've put together this one quick slide, but even then it's not even this simple. So typically the way we've done it is try in advance to have an initial chat, you know, a catch up with the client and the wider team to see what results everybody's got that they can share. We've always found, even just digging through emails, you find anecdotal things that hint at bigger evidence that might exist. You know, if you've got an anecdote from oh, I've just wanted to share this with you because our salesperson said that this is the best month we've ever had, and they're finding it so much easier with the new brand. And you're thinking, well, that's brilliant. I can use that quote, but also, if that's true, can I have the numbers behind that? And then suddenly it's people know that there's numbers that they can go and find and they can go and dig up. Then I think realistically, you know, everybody's busy. If a client is in charge of the data, you have to give them plenty of time to go away and find that, to look through it. It's not even always going to be in their team. That's usually going to involve speaking to sales teams, to finance teams, to, you know, other teams in the business, or even in the organization. Hugh mentioned actually something earlier about hard data. And I remember when we were judging a paper last year, and it was a particular health paper, and it had a kind of a goal of something that they wanted people to do health-wise. I'm not going to get into the detail and name anybody, but something they wanted people to do health-wise. And the way they'd evidenced it working was people self-reporting that they were going to do that thing. But this was on behalf of the health board. And I was thinking, well, for this to be a proper, believable case study, I want to see the numbers that show that they did do that thing, that you know, 1,000 extra people this month took that health step. So if something is quantifiable, I think you always should show it. Otherwise, maybe I'm just a cynical person, but if you don't show it, then it didn't actually happen, that you're clutching at the straws of, well, maybe it could have happened, or people thought it was going to happen. So we've always tried really hard to get, and obviously it's not always available. We've submitted loads of papers as well without this. It's just, if you can, get to the real numbers. And that was, to be honest, that's the reason that this project did so well. Jacqueline and the team there got all sorts of really detailed numbers for us. Like we had so much to play with that it was impossible not to carve a good story out of it. But you won't always have that, but try the best. Give people notice and you get better results from them. And then the last part is filling in the gap. So if you've given people enough notice, you get all the data back. It's never what you wanted. And I don't mean that in a disparaging way about clients at all. I just mean there will be things that you think, I really wanted to prove this thing happened and it's not in these numbers. There will always be gaps. It will never, the chances of the data matching up what's in your head is so slim. So you kind of then have to rethink what you were looking for, but also ask again, we've realized that if we had this number or this figure or this data, it would really help. And quite often it exists. It's just it was in a different spreadsheet or on a different bit of software. So if you've got enough time up your sleeve, people can always find it. So I guess the things to remember when you're going through all this, on the next slide, Nick, is that not all data is created equal. All the stuff you get back, I think you've got to take some of it with a pinch of salt. There's certain things that, particularly when you get into the digital reach and these kind of things of like the immediacy of click-throughs, that is not worth the same amount as actually being able to show a change of behavior or a change in the kind of sales figures or something like that. So I think it's really transparent from judging in the past as well when something doesn't have the cold hard facts. So I think being pretty ruthless with the data, of having other stuff that backs up the story, having a really wide base that shows this can't be a fluke. Look, it's affecting all of these different things. And as part of that, I suppose it might sound like I'm coming across like it all has to be hard facts, hard numbers. Actually, anecdotal evidence makes a story more interesting. Provided you've got solid data to back it up, there's nothing better than, a quote from a salesperson saying it was the easiest year of sales they've ever had when they've worked there 30 years. I mean, that immediately has me interested. I'm reading thinking, well, what on earth happened here? How did this happen? That's more interesting to me than we went up 36%, whatever. But you need both. You kind of need the wide enough base to be able to back it up and have the different types. So as a rough overview, this is the sort of data we had for the Rockback one. We had the easy stuff, the stuff anyone can get at, the social stats, the web visits, web inquiries. Then digging into a slightly more detailed version of that, we had things like social quotes, the types of things people were saying online. We then had the anecdotal stuff coming through the team, which you'd think are easy to get to, but they're only easy to get the talking head stuff that when you ask someone a question and they answer it. And that's never interesting. People will always just say, oh, it was a really effective result. The kind of boring answer that when you're put on the spot. What you really want is over the course of a year to save up any time anyone gives you an anecdote. If somebody sends you something and says, oh, the sales team mentioned this, put that in a folder, save that so you can come back to it and you don't lose it. Then we had all the press coverage, what sort of places, the sentiment, where people were talking about it, the event attendance itself. Of course, we had all of that measured and tracked. But then the best two were those bottom two right ones, which of course only the client team could give us. But we did actually have the market share data and the sales data. And that's really what I think tied the whole thing together, is being able to kind of tie it as one big story. But even if you have all of that, so once you get everything good, there is still another next step, I think, with the results to making it robust. And that is benchmarking the results against the market. So whenever I'm doing this part, my aim is always to try and prove that it wasn't a success. So take your project that you think is a shining success and try and ruin it, try and prove that, oh, well, the whole market was already going up, so this doesn't matter. Or we spent 5 times more than anyone else spent, so it doesn't matter. Just find reasons why it wasn't good and see and basically if they exist, then you have to think again. But hopefully you'll find reasons and you'll realize, actually, we did outperform the rest of the market, or we did outpunch our budget. And you might actually, sometimes what you can find with this as well is, particularly someone asked a question about smaller brands and smaller agencies. This is where I think you can really win, because you're setting context. If you're able to show with a budget 10% the size of this, we achieved 50% more results. Or if you're able to show that the rest of the market was falling and we only made we went up 5%, suddenly you realize small results might be significant. If the whole of the market was down 20% and you were up 5%, you'd be laughing. That's a great result. Context is kind of everything, you know, just showing numbers going up. It could also be that the brand was terrible the year before, and all you have to do is do a semi-professional job, and it's of course going to be benefit. I think if there's any sort of context or benchmarks, those really add to the story and just make it more robust. It's kind of like, oh, I'm not trying to claim we're scientists, but you know the thing with scientists where they're trying to disprove their theories. Once you've got a theory, I think allow yourself enough time that's part of the writing process, that you're trying to disprove that it worked. So I'm going to rattle through the last two, which are much easier. Ironically, we've not even got to writing a word yet. So I think at this point, there's a big review process of get everybody who's involved in the project around. This is everything we have. Are we missing anything? Because as Hugh mentioned, you want the story to sit smoothly, beginning, middle, and end. The last thing you want is a big add-on somewhere that screams out that this was added at the last minute and it doesn't make sense with the objectives. It doesn't make sense with the execution. It doesn't make sense with the results. You need the whole thing to be an arc. And the only way you write a good story arc is if you have it all in front of you before you start. You know, Pixar films aren't written in chronological order. They have all the pieces and then they realize, oh, okay, we need this to happen this time and this to happen then, and then write it then. So I'd definitely make sure I spend 90% of the time gathering the results and checking the story, gathering the whole story together than I would writing it. And then onto the last part is when it gets to writing it. We've kind of got 3 little tips here of kind of things to bear in mind. So of course, write it well. I've kind of said that's a given, like we've not even put that in, but once you've written it well, take care with the design and the typesetting. I've judged plenty of these over the years, and it's much easier to think something is good if it's nicely laid out. It sounds kind of superficial, but it's completely true. It's easier to follow an argument. It just makes you think someone's taking it more seriously. It's more enjoyable to read. You know, likelihood is a judge is going to read at least 10 of these papers, probably in the region of 30 if they're doing a couple of categories or one big category. That's a lot to read. So if you're just poorly laid out and difficult to follow, it's not going to score as well. Secondly, obviously the client team has been involved all the way through this with the data and everything, but even the final thing, make sure that's shared in plenty of time, and that's not about sign off or checking, which obviously is a thing, but aside from that, clients always are able to add something that from our point of view, this bit where you've mentioned this, actually, it also had this effect, you know, something internally that you might not even have ever known, but that just adds to the story. And lastly, before we submit anything, get it proofread by someone who's absolutely not involved in the project. So they'll pick up mistakes, but the other part, if you make sure it's someone who wasn't involved in the project, they'll pick up if you haven't given enough context for it to make sense. So with something like Rockback, we were aware it's a business-to-business thing. They're £500,000 machines. They work in mines. Most people have no idea of the context of that market or that product. So you knew you had to give quite a bit of detail. It's quite hard to know if you've given enough when you've been working on it for 3 years. So get an external face to read it, and that's kind of final tip, I guess. Hopefully there's something useful in there for you. I'll pass back to Paul, and happy to answer any questions if anybody's got any as well.
Thank you very much, Dave and Nick. I think firstly that it's very clear that's an amazing example and fantastic results to bring to life, but also really clear in how you both presented it about how you took a great campaign and a fantastically effective bit of work and created a really compelling paper out of it. And a funny thing happened there, Dave. I was just writing context is everything, as you said, context is everything, and that you're absolutely right. Externally, as what was the rest of the market was doing, what was changing, and what was that external, those external factors, and then internally around wider evidence. And sometimes that anecdotal from a salesperson can spark searching for that extra bit of information or that extra bit of insight. And you know, I'm obviously client side. I quite often feel juiced by the agencies to the nth degree for that extra bit of insight and extra anecdote. But actually, when I go into my next campaign, that makes me more eager to share it earlier with my sales stakeholders, with my brand analysts or my insight stakeholders, to make sure that it's really fit before it's consumer facing, and we can tell a more compelling story about it afterwards. Obviously internally when we're talking to our colleagues, but when considering things like this as well. So thanks very much, both of you, and indeed to all of our speakers. We have about 3 minutes for questions. We've had one so far that went to Hugh. I've not seen any others. Loads of people appreciating the content, so if there's no other questions, what I'll do is I'll wrap up and say thanks again to all of our guests. Massive thanks to Lux Events for putting everything together. And then any questions you have at all can go to Lux Events. There will be a feedback survey shared tomorrow, and please do let us know what you think. And on that note, the feedback survey from the Star Awards this year, and indeed the process this year, is really helpful when I sit down with Graham and the team at Lux and Kat and think about how we change and how we develop and evolve the Star Awards year on year. And just to reiterate a couple of bits of detail, reminder that the deadline is the 13th of February. We're coming to the end of the calendar year. It's a fantastic time for reflection, but the 13th of February is not far away. And before then, though, we have a showcase event on the 17th of January, where we'll hear from 3 previous Gold Star Award winners. So they are What Teaching Taught Our Audience from the Union and Scottish Government, Bibbidi Bobbidi Brew, which is an interesting thing to say on a Zoom call. That's from John Doe Group and Iron Brew. And then lastly, how we helped Fairfax and Favour scale sales higher and higher by Facebooking, Instagramming, pinning, snapping, ticking and talking. And that's from Lane Media and Fairfax and Favour. Thanks to Lux for putting the links into the chat there. Oh, Graham has a question for Nick and Dave, I believe. Which categories did you win in this summer at the Star Awards?
It's putting us on the spot there. I think it was brand development, international marketing, and brand experience for the event. Of course, yeah, Joe's just saved me there.
Fantastic. I had a quick question around what level of testing on the creative and the approach was done prior to launching?
So it was mostly, actually, there was quite a lot of testing. We took 5 names all the way through creative development because it was partially what Nick mentioned about, checking that there wasn't anything offensive in other languages or whatever, but it was also checking if they had the legs to be able to, run whole campaigns about them. So we had 5 that were taken through that testing, and that was shared. The nice thing you have is with a machine that costs, $500,000 and is sold all over the world, you have quite a niche customer set, so they could basically speak to dealers and customers quite quickly and quite easily, run things by them informally, and get just off the cuff feedback straight away. So all the names and the creative was tested. We never tested the final developed creative because we had the faith at that point. We've taken all the insights on and we've learned from all of that. That was then launched basically as a surprise, so that they got the benefit of still a new launch. But yeah, it was probably quite lucky in that sense compared to a lot of brands and the ability to test it.
Yeah, really interesting. Thanks very much again, Dave and Nick. And with that, we come to 3 o'clock. So my last tip would be 1,500 words is a task, but is absolutely possible to be compelling within that. And on that note, I will bid you all a good afternoon and a farewell, and look forward to seeing you in January. Thank you.